Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Big Guy Fantasy Sports Fantasy Football Consistency Show. Are you kidding me? We are finally here. It seems like yesterday that we did our Kings Classic drafts, our local leagues, everything. And folks, it's playoff time. And for those who, some playoffs, you didn't make the playoffs, well, we're sorry. You should have, because if you had read our book and you follow our stuff, you should have been in playoffs. Because I'm in a lot of playoffs, and Ron's in a lot of playoffs, so I know it's working. But as always, I'm Bob Lung for Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and that guy, hey, he's here to stay. He's not going anywhere. He's here to stay, and that is Ron Rigney. How's it going, Ron? Love the
I'm
shirt.
firmly planted, ready to get into some playoff action here. I was only fortunate to get a couple of buys, but I did make the playoffs in quite a few. We were just talking off air about a little David Njoku problem we might have this week, so that might hamper your first round playoff action if
Right.
you've got him in there. But yeah, let's get after it. I mean, again, you're doing this consistency thing that we preach about every week. You're getting points every week, like we talk about, and you should be right there, either in the playoffs or knocking on that door.
Yeah, I definitely one of my best seasons in a long time out of my 18 leagues that I actually have a playoff system, not a best ball or whatever. I made 12 out of 18, so that was pretty good. That's, about 67, 70%. So feeling good about it. Got a lot of first round buys, which is another thing I usually don't get. If I get in the playoffs, it's usually not at the top. But like I said, good year. Let's hope, pray to the football fantasy gods that Derrick Henrys, the Jamar Chases, and all those people in the world all stay nice and healthy at least through week 17, so that they can win us some ships and we can clean off those trophy cases and start putting in some new stuff, or we get a belt. That's what I'm after. All right, so let's talk about Ron's got a belt, Colby's got a belt. I don't have a belt yet. I'm going to get one this year. I'd like to get two. I'd like to be really greedy, but I'll just take one. But let's just get one. We'll start slow. Anyway, so for everybody, thanks again for listening. Let's get rolling into it. We are looking at the quarterback positions, and if you didn't make the playoffs, or you're still watching the show, thank you, appreciate that. But we're going to kind of focus on some of these quarterbacks in these positions that you may have had on your team, and probably not why you didn't make the playoffs. Like if you have Dak Prescott, now I get it, he got hurt, but Patrick Mahomes is down to 23% consistent, folks. Whatever you do next year, do not jump on a Patrick Mahomes bandwagon, unless you're going to get him late. Like if you can draft him in the what I call the Ron, you and I kind of hover in that quarterback range of like round
Mm-hmm.
6, 7, maybe 5 if the right person's there. If Mahomes doesn't fall back to that next year in 25 for our drafts, I'm not drafting him. I just not going to do it. I mean, they're winning football games without him being a superstar, without him putting up god awful numbers, or the god amazingly numbers from a few years ago when he won the MVPs. He's doing what it's to get done to win football games. Difference between an great NFL player and a great fantasy player. Mahomes this year is a great NFL player. He's doing what it takes to get it done, with a little help from his friends, which we all know about. But we won't get into that. But him, Jared Goff is 38%. Kyler Murray, not that great. I mean, he's at 46%. Jordan Love is just over the 50% mark at 55. Brock Purdy, which, we kind of loved, but he's at 58%. Of course, he's been injured a little bit. I'm sure there's others I'm missing here. CJ Stroud, which of course a lot of people are high on, 38%. Aaron Rodgers, like I said, Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, just a lot of quarterbacks that many people drafted. Luckily, Ron, we went for the Lamar Jacksons, the Jalen Hurts, did a lot of Joe Burrows. That's what probably is saving me in a lot of leagues. But I've also done some nice, and you have too, some nice quarterback streaming with people like Sam Darnold and Tua and Stafford and Bo Nix, and finding those matchups that just paid off a little bit too. And maybe next year we should start focusing a little bit more on those kind of scenarios of quarterback streaming. But Ron, how, the ones that got you into the playoffs versus the ones that didn't? Tell us about your experience this year with the quarterback position, and who did you good and who did you wrong.
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. I've got one league, the One Kings Classic League. The Snake League didn't end so well, but I feel like I got good quarterback play there. It was just my skill players. I went with Baker Mayfield and Jordan Love there, and that ended up working out to the point where Baker Mayfield was kind of my every week starter, which is not the way that I had planned it out, but it ended up working fine. And then my one playoff team, I've been going Jared Goff every week, and he's not been the consistent guy, but he's had a couple of big games, and he's put up some big numbers when you need it. He's done just enough. But it looks like when you look at our consistency chart here, it's streakiness. You've got some guys that'll rattle off 3-4 straight, and then you don't hear from them for a couple of weeks. I'm looking at Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson down there. Justin Herbert, we were talking about a few weeks ago, kind of coming around, and he put together 4 straight games, and that was kind of it. And then we haven't heard from him for the last 2 weeks. So you mentioned Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. One of the things I was able to do in my one money league that I'm still in is I was able to get the first round bye there, 2 quarterback league. It's not all bad when you can put Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts out there as your 2 QBs. It's pretty solid. So I was able to do that. But you talked about Brock Purdy as well. He's pretty much been thrown to one guy, and that's George Kittle. We were talking about off air how Deebo Samuel, you got to scroll pretty far down to find him anywhere in the neighborhood of consistency or total points. He's just not there. So it's a kind of a mixed bag. But again, I think it's just a lot of, this last column that we're looking at here, this last couple week 13, week 14 columns. There's not a lot of clutch games there, not a lot of ticks in that stat sheet.
No, there's not. The interesting thing is that the average points or the clutch factor has went up. So even though there hasn't been a lot of clutch games, there's been a lot of bigger games. So we've had, the Josh Allen games, the Lamar Jackson, the Joe Burrow when he threw for 5 touchdowns. So we've had some big games that have raised the average, which has probably lowered the clutch games for some of these guys because they can't reach that level. It's actually almost at 20 points now. It's like 19.96. So again, last year it was in the, upper 18s, mid 18s or low 19s. So, we're almost a full point ahead of last year, which is probably why we don't have the consistency in quarterbacks, but it just shows you how volatile they are. That 1 point average just from one year to the next can hold so many, quarterbacks. We have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks that are over 60%. I mean, that's not good, kids. 60% is basically the threshold. Like that should be the number 12 quarterback is around 60%. That is the number 8 quarterback, which is Brock Purdy at 58. That's not good. That's not a good sign for the quarterbacks. What it is a good sign for is that we know it, you know it because you're a listener. And next year when you go in, you stay away from those quarterbacks early. You let them folks take their Josh Allens around 2 or 3. And, you take, the guys that we recommend when we get to this next year. But it'll probably be guys like, Purdy, Tua, Jaden Daniels. Well, maybe not Tua. He still scares me with his injuries. But, the Purdys, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrows, Baker Mayfield's, those are the guys you want to wait on because we'll be able to load up on running backs, wide receivers, and then take that quarterback in round 6, 7, or 8. So definitely love that. So Ron, tell us about again, we want to kind of highlight some folks that are kind of on the hot streak right now, maybe as you go into the playoffs or you pick them up as potential backup because you might need them in some weeks if your quarterback gets hurt. I mean, it's happened last year. I lost 2 quarterbacks in 2 straight weeks in the playoffs and basically lost the finals because I had nothing left. So you really got to protect yourself. Make sure you have some good players. So Ron, tell us who you got is potential guy that might have some good matchups and actually has looked pretty good lately.
And I'm not crazy. I just got some new glasses today. I can see the chart. The guy that I'm highlighting, I mean to highlight him. So when you look down there and you see that 10% consistency, trust me, I think I might know what I'm doing here. So the guy that I'm going to highlight, not taking off a lot of clutch games, but a guy that got benched, came back, and that's Bryce Young. And since he's come back, he's looked a little more like an NFL quarterback. He's gotten it together a little bit, put together a couple of games that look pretty solid, but he's cut way down on the interceptions. And again, we want to see that completion percentage go up a little bit. It's still not where we want it to be. But last 3 times out, he's put up pretty solid numbers when you look at the yardage totals, 263, 298, only had 198 last time out, has had a touchdown in the last 6 games that he started. So again, not a lot of weapons there. He's built a nice rapport with Adam Thielen. Of course, we got Chuba Hubbard there. But the thing I like the most about that, kind of combine that with the fact that he's looked a lot better since he's come back. In the next 4 weeks, the Panthers have the Cowboys, the Cardinals, the Bucks, and the Falcons, which are all in that bottom third as far as allowing fantasy points to quarterbacks. And then you've got the Buccaneers sitting at 1. You've got the Cowboys at 4, and you've got the Falcons at 7. So you've got some juicy matchups there. Again, they're going to let this guy play. They want to see what they have. There's no reason to sit him, and they don't have anything to play for anyway. So number 1 overall pick, they're going to let him. They should let him chuck it around, just kind of see what they have there. So if you're looking at somebody to maybe add as an insurance policy, especially in those deeper leagues, he's probably out there. Again, not a lot of consistency there, not a ton to get super excited about, but that improvement we've seen since he's come back speaks volumes. And compare it with that schedule, it could be a nice little consistent quarterback here for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, and again, what we're talking about is a guy that you want to just stash on your bench just in case your main starter either has a tough matchup. Maybe they're playing the Steelers at Pittsburgh and it's bad weather where you could run into some trouble. Weather is going to be crucial this time of year. Games in Buffalo, games in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, all on the East Coast. You don't know what. I mean, it's been bitter cold. I think it's supposed to warm up this weekend, but that just could bring rain. And so, just got to be careful. And hey, Carolina's a little bit warmer and they play a lot of games against teams in domes in Tampa and stuff like that. So definitely keep an eye on that. The guy I'm going to talk about, everybody's heard because this guy's been red hot. And that is, the ghost buster himself, Sam Darnold. He's back and he's obviously not seeing ghosts anymore, or at least he's not in some of these recent games. Last week was a classic, just went off at home against the Falcons, 347 yards passing, and count them, 5 touchdown passes. Needless to say, it was fun because I really didn't need the wins to still have a first-round bye. But boy, it was fun just to beat down somebody again this past week. And Darnold was definitely heading up the train on that one. But interestingly enough, even though he has 4 straight clutch games, they haven't all been those kind of games. So the week before that, 235, and he had 2 touchdowns, 22 yards rushing. The week before that, it was at Chicago. So it was in, the blustery city there, and he put up 330 and 2. And guess what? He plays Chicago this coming week at home. So could see a similar scenario. Then he's got, I think I had this in front of me and I lost it. At Seattle, so basically a dome game. Home against Detroit, a dome game. And then if you go into week 18, which most people don't, doesn't matter because they're at Detroit. So guess what? The rest of the season they're inside. So if you don't have Sam Darnold, somebody's got him on their bench. Maybe you can trade. Most leagues don't do trades, but Dynasty usually do. So, hey, if you're going, you're trying to make a playoff run here, maybe worth picking up Darnold, give up a second, third rounder, especially if it can make the difference between you winning, the crown versus second or third. So definitely check that out. Sam Darnold has been red hot and looks like he should continue that because Vikings got something to play for. They're still fighting for playoff spots. They're not going to win their division because obviously Detroit's way ahead of them, but they still have a very good chance. I think they're the 6th or 7th seed right now. So they're still in pretty good shape there in that run. So let's move on to the running back position. And, it's still Saquon Barkley's world, and we're just living in it. Didn't have the monster week. It's sad when you're like, oh, well, Barkley only had 14.4 fantasy points. But to be honest with you, that is it's just disappointing when you've been used to 30, 35, points every week. He has just been on fire. And I don't think it's going to slow down. Again, they're playing for, they're trying to, get the number 1 seed. They're battling it out with Detroit for that spot. So, they're not going to let up at all. They went against Carolina. I guess he scaled it down and only rushed for 124 yards instead of the 255 he put up on the Rams a few weeks ago. Slacker. But anyway, still is who he is. Derrick Henry had a bye, which, at first when I saw that long way ahead, I was like, oh man, I hope I don't need Derrick Henry that week, but I didn't. But it was good. Now he's rested, and now he can go into the playoffs and hopefully do some damage for me there. He's still at 100%. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs still at 100%. Alvin Kamara is at 92. Josh Jacobs at 92, having his best season ever. Kyron Williams is at 92, still cranking along. And then our personal favorite, of course, David Montgomery at 92%, still just cranking along. Barkley is 85, Aaron Jones 85, Joe Mixon at 80, Kenneth Walker injured, but he's still at 80, and Devin Achan is at 80 as well. No, I guess he's at 77. Anyway, Brian Robinson, that's who I missed. Okay, Brian Robinson had a bye week as well, still at 80%. Ron, we've talked all season about how great the running backs have been, how consistent they've been, just so much better, so much more consistent than we've ever seen at a running back position because they're being more involved. They are becoming more of a factor in the game. This is why we're not seeing the consistency in the wide receiver positions. We'll get to that next. But Ron, I know we all have quite a number of these guys in the top. That's especially on our successful teams. I drafted more running backs in Kings Classic draft than I ever had. It really wasn't on purpose. I didn't do it because I wanted to do it. It just fell that way. Guys like J.K. Dobbins, Brian Robinson, some of those guys, Chuba Hubbard, falling to a lower, more of a round 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of thing. And certainly that's been beneficial. I mean, surprisingly, some of the top backs are the ones that have struggled, the Breece Halls, of course, Chubb was hurt, but Pacheco, J.K. Dobbins was a late rounder. Trying to think, there were some other ones that I was thinking of, but of the ones that are in these upper echelon here, Ron, which ones have been beneficial to you, getting you to the playoffs in your leagues that you're in, and which ones let you down that you thought were going to get you to the playoffs?
Well, mine is kind of those, not necessarily those upper echelon guys. I got a few of those in dynasty leagues that I'm in. I've got one where I actually have Jonathan Taylor, CMC, and Bijan Robinson as my 3 running backs. When they're all healthy, it looks great. But yeah. CMC, I've not got much out of. But still, it's not bad to be able to fall back on those other 2 guys. But again, in my one money league, David Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, right there. But one of the things I want to talk about, and we hear guys on the radio all the time talk about this. Jeff Mans shouts this from the mountaintops, and it's something that I think this year I've learned. It's something I always try to do, and that's handcuffing running backs. And this year it's come in clutch for me more than it ever has. And I have Jonathan Taylor in my one Kings Classic playoff team. I got Trey Sermon. I've had to use him for a couple of weeks. But the guy that I want to highlight feeds right into that handcuffing running backs. And on that dynasty team with Ken Walker, I made sure to go get the guy that, best running back nickname in the game, the champagne of running backs, Mr. Zach Charbonnet. And he was out there as a free agent. Nobody had him. So I have him, scooped him up, was able to start him a few weeks ago when Ken Walker was out the first time. And again, when Ken Walker's in there, Ken Walker is the lead dog. There's no question about it. You might see Zach Charbonnet a little bit on third down, come in and switch it up. But he's not a guy you can feel comfortable starting at your flex spot when Ken Walker's in there. The games he hasn't been in there, he's gotten 14 carries, 18 carries earlier on in the season. Every time he started, he's scored at least 1 touchdown too, so that helps. He's got a nose for the end zone. But last time out, I don't know if you saw his numbers at halftime, but dude, I think had 28 points at halftime. Ended up with like 34. And again, all because I was able to add him and handcuff him. Again, guy that was just sitting out there on waivers to be had. And a lot of leagues, I think that was the same way. Now, he was probably a popular guy after this week, but last week ended up with 134 yards on 22 carries, 2 scores on the ground, but also caught 7 out of 7 targets for 59 yards. Did a little bit of everything, was all over the place, broke off some big runs there. So, again, not so much Again, those quarterbacks that you drafted that weren't so consistent, hopefully you got these consistent running backs that work because they lifted you up a little bit. But again, Zach Charbonnet, looks like Ken Walker missed a second straight day of practice today. That does not bode well for his chances to play this week. He might sit again. They know they're in good hands with Zach Charbonnet, so he might be a guy that you can get yet another great week out of. But do not forget, and again, I might even talk Mr. Lung in here and let me do a little article in the guide about handcuffing your running backs and how important it really is. Because again, you got to do it, especially when you got to have those guys come playoff time.
Yeah, and so many of these backs are not injury prone, but they 18 games is a long season, and they get dinged up, they get banged up. They miss a series, 2, 5, couple games. But the interesting thing, Ron, now that you bring it up, I was starting to look at the players, and there isn't many good handcuffs, though. And I think that lies the problem.
You're right.
Because outside of Jalen Warren to Najee, and basically you could say they're 50-50 anyway, and Charbonnet, of course, to Kenneth Walker. I mean, Breece Hall didn't have anybody. I mean, maybe it's Braylon Allen, but they haven't had too much of a chance there. But a lot of these guys, there's not somebody good. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery aren't a handcuff. You're going to draft one or the other. If you draft both, I guess that's not a terrible idea. But who's behind Kyron Williams? Who's behind Josh Jacobs? Who's behind Kamara? Bijan Robinson. I guess you could say Tyler Algier, which has been okay. There's nobody behind Barkley. There's nobody behind Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Brian Robinson, maybe Eckler, Connor, Cook. So there's a few. Maybe James Cook, Ray Davis.
Hey, now I was going to say I'll argue with you on that one. I love me some Ray Davis, and he's come in when James Cook's been out of there. So
on that one, and maybe Trey Benson. Is that his name? Trey Benson behind James Conner, but hasn't had the opportunity. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, Chase Brown, pretty much took over. Pollard's got Tajay Spears, but really hasn't done much in his. So I mean, I think I love your idea about an article, but maybe we almost have to tier them, right? Here's the
sure.
You draft him, you've got to draft this guy. Like it may have to be next round, but you've got to have him. Where it'd be like, okay, if you draft Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, maybe 4 rounds later. Depends on obviously King's Classic is a different world, so you really have to watch. That doesn't happen very often, but I love the idea, and I think it's more important than ever. You just have to be careful to not overdo it, because then you're taking up roster spots, and if person doesn't get hurt, you're not going to do it. Now, if you got a deep league, like a dynasty league where you can stash a lot of them, absolutely, I'm all in. I totally get that. So my guy I'm going to quickly talk about is Chuba Hubbard. We talked about handcuffing. So, the idea is that Jonathan Brooks was the handcuff to Chuba Hubbard because at some point Jonathan Brooks is the future, right? But he came in injured, so he wasn't going to play till week 10 or 11. Ended up being week 12, a little bit in week 13, and then he tore the same ACL. I think that he has a bad doctor. I mean, my doctor told me when I tore my ACL that my ACL was basically bionic. Like it would be very hard for me to tear the same one. I get it. NFL football is a lot more violent than me mowing the lawn. But
I don't know. You get after it. I've seen you with that weed eater.
I do. I usually try to run just for the exercise. But still, it's like, how could you tear the same one? Anyway, but he's out again. So, Chuba Hubbard now will hopefully roll people through the playoffs and through 2 championships, because you probably have Chuba Hubbard as your flex, running back 3. Maybe he's a 2 because somebody got hurt, but yeah, he's just been on fire. 3 straight clutch games, 2 out of his last 3, but he's 77% on the year. I mean, he's right there with James Conner, James Cook, Devin Achin, those kind of folks. So definitely been, was he ranked? He's 11th in total points. So definitely been, maybe not a league winner yet, but he's definitely got you to the playoffs when you probably didn't think you would with Chuba Hubbard on your team. But he has been running like a man possessed. So definitely love Chuba Hubbard. All right, we move on to the wide receiver position. And Ron, we've kind of talked a lot about this year. This is these are not your grandpa's wide receivers when they used to dominate. Like, I shouldn't say grandpa. Your older cousins wide receivers, because we used to have 70% down to, somebody was 70% consistent was down to the bottom of, a wide receiver 2, like 24 deep. Now 70% ends at about, I think, 12 or 14. 60%, which should be the top 36, is maybe getting to 24, maybe 28. It is not a good, consistent year for wide receivers. We were talking a little bit earlier about how some of these players who are ranked in the top 20, but because they had some big games, like a Nick Westbrook, Akine, who else were we talking about? Jaden Reed, who's 18th in total points, 54% consistent. Jordan Addison, who's been red hot lately, but only because he's red hot. Now he's 20th in total points, still only 45% consistent. DK Metcalf is 29th in total points, 45% consistent. Marvin Harrison Jr. is 28th, only 46% consistent. So some of these guys, Juwan Jennings is another one, had that huge game. He's 55% and he's ranked 17th in total points. I mean, you can go, Garrett Wilson is 7th in total points, and everybody's talking about what a terrible year he's having, which he is from a consistency standpoint. He's only at 62%, but he's 7th in total points. I mean, that's just amazing to me. I just noticed that JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, is 6th in total points. He's 69% consistent, but I don't think I would have thought he was that high. I mean, he's had some decent games recently, but yeah. The wide receiver position, if you don't have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, that's about it. I mean, those two guys are up there. They're 92%. Malik Neighbors is 91, but he's missed, a couple games. A.J. Brown is 80%, but now he's fighting with Jalen Hurts, so we don't know what's going to happen there. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 3rd in total points. He's 77% consistent. CeeDee Lamb is 77%. And Terry McLaurin are 77%. They're ranked 3rd, 4th, and 5th in total points, and they are over 100 points behind Jamar Chase. So Chase is doing what Travis Kelce did a couple years ago, what CMC did last year to running backs. He's just pulling away. And this week they were talking about this is one of the worst matchups so far this year for him, or worst for the cornerback. Whoever's guarding him, they said his ranks dead last in coverage. And Chase gets him this week. I'm like, can he do it next week when I need him in the semifinals? But I do have him in a couple of leagues that I am still, I actually have playing this week. So I'm rooting for him. But yeah, it's just been crazy. And the funny thing, remember back in June, July, he was holding out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I was drafting Jamar Chase at number 7, number 6. They're like, well, you had to take him 101, because he was always taken after McCaffrey. Not in early August, he wasn't, because there was still talk of holdout. I mean, I swear in King's Classic, I'd have to look, but I think I was picked number 7, and I think I got Jamar Chase there. Pretty sure. So, yeah. So it was interesting. But Ron, of the guys here, and then obviously you can talk about, your player that you're kind of highlighting, but of the wide receivers, which ones have helped you get to the playoffs and which ones have kind of let you down? Maybe they were high picks, high ADPs. You drafted them at, at a spot that you're like, oh, okay. I know Michael Pitten's one that I drafted a lot of and have gotten killed by. He's at a whole 33% consistent, and he's 49th in total points. So he's not doing anything good. He's not even just scored a lot of points in one game. I love him too, and maybe he'll save it for week 16 and 17.
Seemed like for me that I picked most of the time around pick 6 to 9, and so got a lot of AJ Brown, got a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and again, you can't really argue with what those guys are doing. I
Yeah,
mean, the
no, it's not
consistency's down
terrible.
a tiny bit, but it's not down so much that you're going to be upset about it. They've been there performing. Terry McLaurin's a guy that I got in a couple leagues. It's really paid off as far as outperforming his ADP. You were talking about guys too that were outperforming their ADP, and you wouldn't think that they were in the top 20 or top 10. Another guy that you wouldn't think would be as high as he is Cortland Sutton, ninth in total
Yeah,
points.
right.
And we love Cortland Sutton. We talked about him for years. So the guy that I'm going to highlight though, because I got a couple shares of him and he's paid off, but I've had to take the good with the bad, and that's Jordan Addison. And Jordan Addison's second year in the league, so he's still getting kind of acclimated. But dude's a big play waiting to happen, and he's shown that in a couple of different games this year. But again, you get those 8 for 133 and 3-score games, and then you have to put up with the 2 for 25s, the 2 for 22s, the 3 for 36. So
Mm-hmm.
again, growing pains with him. He's not quite there yet, but again, you've seen Sam Darnold take those steps, and obviously it's going to benefit him when you have a guy on the other side like Justin Jefferson. He's gonna get a lot of the attention. But now it's become to the point where you got to kind of pick one or the other because one's going to get you if the other one doesn't. So puts Jordan Addison in a good spot. Has Chicago coming up this week, so a little bit tougher matchup. They've been a little better against fantasy wide receivers than some of the teams that he's had in the last couple of weeks. But again, Sam Darnold kind of building that rapport with him and him getting a little, you're kind of seeing him mature as the season goes on as well. But you just got to hope for better consistency next year. Probably shoot up. I don't want to say he'll shoot up draft boards. Probably going to be a little more expensive next year. And also, too, we got to look at what that situation is at quarterback with Minnesota. Again, Sam Darnold is a free agent after this season. They drafted J.J. McCarthy. So be interesting to see what they decide to do with quarterback. And that's going to have a direct impact on not only Justin Jefferson, but Mr. Addison as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know the Vikings obviously want, I guess they drafted JJ, so they want him to be the future. But I think they would be stupid to let Sam walk. Now they're going to have to pay. Now I don't think they're going to have to pay him $30 million, but it might be 25 to keep him. And I mean, he's not that old, right? I mean, he's what, early 30s, right?
I don't think so. I don't know that he's even that old yet.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was looking at the game logs. You were talking about Addison. Interestingly enough, Addison's breakouts started when T.J. Hawkinson came back. Now he did have a
Sam Darnold actually like 27 years old.
Oh, right. Yeah. Hell yeah. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
Right. So why would you not lock him up? I mean, let JJ have 2 or 3 years behind him. I mean, he obviously knows how to run the offense. They're going to the playoffs with him. Why would you just throw that away when you have Jefferson and you've got Aaron Jones, Aaron Jones is 30, but draft a running back maybe for the future. But anyway, like you said, when Hawkinson came back in week 9, the only non-clutch games was the 2 for 25 against Jacksonville and the 4 for 54, which just misses, that he had against Arizona. But the other ones, 5 for 42 touchdown, 3 for 61 touchdown, 8 for 162, 8 for 133, and 3 touchdowns. So maybe it's Hawkinson that's kind of helping Addison get a little more open because teams have to worry about Hawkinson getting open, and he certainly has had some big games as well. So, but anyway, just throwing that out. No, that's good stuff. The guy I wanted to just talk about, I'm going to talk about the Lions in general, but there's 2 guys. One, Jameson Williams, who's been up and down. Certainly his consistency is not there. He's not somebody we're going to rely on from a consistency standpoint. But on the other hand, 64% consistent for the year. He's 33rd in total points. So, he's not the opposite we've been talking about, the high scoring few games. He's been getting the 10, 12 points, but he's 3 out of his last 4. Tim Patrick is another guy. If you can't get Jameson, or Jameson's, definitely on somebody's team, which he probably is. Look at Tim Patrick. Had a nice week last week, 6 catches, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I don't think it's going to happen a lot. He could float back to the 2 for 48 they got the week before, but he's been 4 for 55. That's close. I mean, a clutch game is around 10, 11. So he got 9.5. But if you're in a deep league or you're just desperate because, you've lost some wide receivers, you don't have any strong flex players this week, and you need points, could have a high ceiling. Detroit has
Buffalo,
right, at home. So you got to
At home.
believe that's going to be a shootout. So yeah, this could be another good week for Tim Patrick. Definitely Jamison Williams, get him in your lineup for sure. But definitely keep an eye out on Mr. Patrick as well. All right, let's head to the tight end position, Ron. And well, it is what it is. It's just as bad as it always is. We have, let's see, 5 tight ends over 60%. Believe it or not, Mr. Travis Kelce has finally made it there after a long struggle to get to that point. He's at 62%. Jonnu Smith is at 62%. Brock Bowers at 69%. George Kittle, 82%. Trey McBride, 83%. And the amazing thing about Trey McBride is he's number 3 in fantasy points. He's 83% consistent. But Ron, what hasn't he done this year? Scored a single touchdown.
Yes.
Not a single one. You imagine if he had scored 6 touchdowns? Like, he'd be in first place in total points. He is 30 points behind Brock Bowers. So, yeah. So if he got, 4 or 5 touchdowns, he'd be a lot closer. But, yeah, it's amazing that how many fantasy points and how consistent he's been with 0 touchdowns receiving. Like you said, after that, you've got a lot of just messiness. This is the time of year that if you got a George Kittle or a Brock Bowers or, these upper guys, okay, it's a no-brainer. But, Ron, what are we doing when we don't have those guys? We have David Njoku's, which we do. We have Zach Ertz, Kate Ottens, Evan Ingram's, Pat Freiermuth. I know I've been very lucky in Kings Classic because I had Ingram. He kind of started off good and then got hurt. That David Njoku, he's certainly been there for us, and he's there in total points. He's 9th in total points, but he's up and down. He started off really slow. 3 out of his last 4, but now he may not play this week. If you're really desperate, grab Jordan Akins. He has not done a bad job, if I'm not mistaken, when Njoku's out. The only reason I know this is because I have him in a dynasty league, and it's a tight end premium, so I don't want to drop him just in case, like Njoku misses. But so the weeks Njoku didn't play, not great. 110. That's 1 for 10, 1 catch for 10 yards, 4 for 29. Yeah, so not really as much excitement about that than I thought. I thought he had some decent games when he was out, but I guess not. So maybe Jordan Akins isn't the answer. But, Ron, talk about your tight end experience this year. It's usually as fun as always. I guess the sad part is if you drafted Travis Kelce early, that's been the most painful scenario. Luckily, I did not do that. I don't know if you did. I stayed away from Kelce, not because I didn't like Kelce. I just wanted to draft him that high. And I was drafting guys like Ingram and Njoku and Kyle Pitts, who had another, 1 catch for 8 yards? Did he even have a catch last week? Can't remember.
I don't have him anywhere, so I don't know, but it wasn't much more than that. I do know that.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, 0.0. Last week, 1.14. There we go. So, I'm sorry, 2.4. 1 catch, 14 yards, 2.4. That's what Kyle Pitts is getting you. The illustrious superstar. Yeah, I'm done with him. Come on. I don't even know what to say. Kirk Cousins used to love his tight ends in Minnesota. So why is he not throwing to Kyle Pitts? Is Kyle Pitts not getting open? Or is he just so focused on getting Drake London and now Ray McLeod and Darnell Mooney? Just not care about Kyle Pitts? Or does Kyle Pitts really not get open and get any separation? We just don't know it. I don't know, but I know one thing. Kyle Pitts is going to probably fall out of the top 12 next year, or may fall out of the top 12. He may not, but from a drafting perspective, because I don't want anything to do with him. I might just take the George Kittles or the Brock Bowers or Trey McBrides, or, I guess another disappointment was Dalton Kincaid, right? Wasn't he supposed to be the second coming of Travis Kelce?
Yep.
And he started off red hot. He was, 4 out of his first 7, and then hasn't earned a clutch game since. Now, I think he's had a couple injuries in and out there, but yeah, it's been ugly. But anyway, Ron, your without throwing up, your thoughts on your tight ends.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, outside of having George Kittle in my dynasty league, I would compare my tight end experience this year to maybe being about as fun as like a case of food poisoning or something. It's just not been great, and
Right.
it's definitely not something you want to shoot for. But again, you're talking about David Njoku, and he didn't practice today, so not looking good for playing this week. I didn't get a first round bye into Win Kings Classic, so I need him to be in the lineup. But I did look at waivers. A couple guys out there, even in the deeper leagues that we're in, that I feel decent about. So I'm going to give you 2 here. First one I looked at was Tyler Conklin. Now, again, the epitome of inconsistency here. But last week, coming out for the Jets, he had 3 for 33, so didn't earn a clutch game there. He's got a couple of games where he did 6 for 55, 5 for 93 early on in the season. But I was looking at him. He's got Jacksonville this week, who's given up 7 receiving touchdowns to tight ends, so they're there kind of at the bottom. But another guy that's way off the radar that is going to definitely be an all or nothing guy, and that's the third string tight end in Los Angeles for the Chargers, Mr. Stone Smart. Will Dissly, the guy that we love, Will Dissly here. He may not play this week. He went out last week with an injury. He's going to be out. So Stone Smart comes in, grabs 3 passes for 54 yards. Big athletic guy, 6'4", 226. He's got the Bucs this week. The Bucs are not good against the tight end either. When you look at what they've allowed on the season to that tight end position, they're 5th worst, 76 grabs for 917 yards. So as I was looking at Tyler Conklin and him, I went ahead and added Tyler Conklin. Now I'm kind of on the fence after I look at what the Bucs are allowing at the tight end position as well. So I think either one of those guys, again, probably touchdown dependent, but if you're missing Njoku this week, like we are, one of your guys has a rough matchup, or you weren't able to get one of those top guys. Of course, you'll see this already after this happened, but as we're recording right now, I get the alert on my phone. George Kittle caught a 33-yard pass from Brock Purdy, so he's already getting it done if you need him, so that's good. But again, you can do a lot worse than Tyler Conklin or even Mr. Stone Smart this week, so take a look at them on the waiver wire.
So if you're a movie buff, get Smart. I just had to throw that in there. And it's Smart with 2 T's. Remember that.
It is 2 T's.
Spell it correctly. Stone with 1 T, Smart with 2 T's. The guy I'm going to talk about is also pretty smart, and he's been doing pretty well lately. Actually, has had a pretty decent season. It's Tucker Kraft from Green Bay. He's 8th in total points. 3 straight, now 54% for the year. Definitely has been one of the favorite targets of Jordan Love lately. It's been really interesting. I mean, the wide receiver, it's almost like Russian roulette. You literally put 4 guys in the chamber, spin it, and see which one comes out. That's who's going to have the hot week. Christian Watson hadn't done anything in weeks. In fact, in week 12, he had 0.0 catches. Last week, 4 for 114. Jaden Reed, who has had a pretty decent season, and 2 weeks ago is 3 for 24 and 2 touchdowns. The next game, week 14, last week, 0.0. You don't know. Romeo Doubs has been out a couple games now. He might come back. Does he get the ball? We don't know. It's a mess. But Tucker Kraft, yeah, he's been getting the ball. 6 for 78 2 weeks ago. Last week, 3 for 41 with a touchdown. Week 12, 2 for 26 with a touchdown. So 3 straight clutch games. If anybody's getting the ball, it's definitely him. No, Grant, he's not, scoring 25 fantasy points like John Smith does. But he is being productive and he is being consistent. So definitely check that out. Of course, Jonnu Smith only does it when I'm watching him on television. So we found that out this past week. So, and for the funny story, we'll have to tell it real quick. So I was gone all day, and I came home. And when I got home, I looked down at my thing, and Jonnu Smith had 0.0 points. And I texted, or I sent a message to Ron and Colby, and like, did Jonnu Smith get hurt? He's got 0 points. And they're like, no, he's just had no targets in the whole game, but they're going to overtime. And I just happened to flick the game on just to see. And he went and scored 13.4 fantasy points in one drive because he caught 3 passes for I don't know how many yards and scored the touchdown. And I was like, there it is. Thank you, Jonnu, for coming through, only because I was watching. I doubt if that'll happen ever again, but it was a lot of fun when I watched it because, Ron, if you watched it too, they threw the same play in back-to-back plays. They threw, what do they call it, a bubble screen where basically he takes a step back, catches the ball, and there's 3 guys blocking in front of him. So they threw that once. He got 25 yards. They came back and did it again. He got 15 yards, and then he caught the touchdown pass. And it was just hilarious that he just kind of came out of nowhere and performed. I hope he does that for me in the playoffs. That's all I can say. But anyway, Ron, tell everybody where they can find. Oh, before that, I assume you have a card. You must have a card. Yes, you do.
I do. You know, we're talking awfully favorably about these running backs the last few weeks, so I wanted to bring out a couple of old. Well, I say old school guys. One of them's way more old school than the other, but a couple of guys that have always got it done at that position. Got a little Curtis Martin right here, and if you remember Curtis Martin, this dude does not get the love that he deserves. If you know anything about Curtis Martin, when he was in lineup, 2 things. He was getting it 20 times, and he was going to get 100 yards. Dude was just smooth. He wasn't flashy like Barry Sanders, but the guy got it done. Hall of Famer, fun guy to watch. And then last but definitely not least, one of the all-time GOATs, Mr. Jim Brown. Little 1960 tops action there. I don't know if you can see that very well, but again, if you haven't seen Jim Brown highlights, this dude would just go out and abuse people. He would seek out the hit. He would bring the hit to the linebackers. Dudes did not want to hit him. Just impressive to watch. And it's a shame that we didn't get to see him play a little longer, but what we did get to see was pretty damn impressive to say the least. So brought out those 2 guys for you tonight. So anyway, go over to Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Check out everything we got. Check out all the articles. I'm looking at some wide receivers this week that are outperforming their ADP. Even a guy in there that's a lot higher than you think, that's in the top 20 in total points for wide receivers that was not even drafted in most leagues. So check that out. Doing a little outlook for those guys next year, but we'll have consistently cashing. We'll have the props. We'll have everything that we normally have. So come over and check it out at BigGuyFantasySports.com.
2 quick things on your cards. Number 1, if you have the opportunity, find Curtis Martin's induction speech into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And take tissues with you.
Yes.
Literally sit. Oh, dude, you just sit there and go, it can't be real. But what he went through as a kid,
you're right.
It's just heartbreaking. Anyway, and Jim Brown, he was also a college All-American in lacrosse.
Yes.
At Syracuse.
So he was
a college All-American in football and a college All-American in lacrosse. He was actually, if lacrosse had national things, but he made more money at football. But anyway, Jim Brown was just a beast. No doubt about it. Definitely check out any videos you can see of that. But as Ron said, check everything out here. Big Guy Fantasy Sports. James Knight stuff will be out there tomorrow for the under the radar waiver wires. Good luck this week. We hope to see everybody back next week, winning your playoff games, and we'll keep going into the semifinals and finals, and let's all win some ships together. So for Ron Rigney, I'm Bob Lung. Take care. God bless, and we will see you soon.